one of the biggest cons on the PodTrack P8 by Zoom is the lack of. Today, I'm going to be unboxing the Zoom PodTrack P8, an ultimate workstation for podcasters. Basically, it's an audio interface, recorder, and mixer all built into one, made for podcasters. So straight out of the box, you'll find that the PodTrack P8 is meant to be simple in operation wise, so you won't find all those technical stuff that you will normally see on a mixer like auxiliary outs, compressors, limiters, and all those effects. This is basically made for podcasters who do not want the technical stuff and they just basically want to take this out of the box, hit on record, and record on their podcast straight away. Now, a lot of you might be wondering and be comparing the PodTrack P8 with the Rodecaster and figuring out what's the pros and cons on both of these devices. So in this video, I'm going to share you the pros and cons of the PodTrack P8 compared with the Rodecaster. But first, let's unbox the PodTrack P8 and show you what it comes with. I'm just going to quickly open this up and show you what it comes with. Okay, so inside the box, there we go. Pretty simple, yeah? Basically, your manuals, which is all here. We have of course, the price PodTrack P8 right here in its little furry bag. There we go. That's the Zoom PodTrack P8. We'll get into the controls in a while. Well, that's basically about it. We have the adapter to power up the PodTrack P8, and that's really about it. There's no cables, nothing else comes with the box. Basically, it's your PodTrack P8 and your adapter. So this is the PodTrack P8, basically the bigger brother of the PodTrack P4, which comes with 6 microphone inputs with individual phantom power settings, which is quite useful because on some audio interfaces and mixers, you might find that while they have phantom power, it's one button for all the inputs on the device. So with the PodTrack P8, you basically have individual phantom power settings, which enables you to use a mix of dynamic microphones and condenser microphones in the same recording session without potentially damaging the dynamic microphones that do not require phantom power. Now, we also have a smartphone input, and this is for you if you have a caller that calls in through phone or through Skype on your phone, where you have a TRRS input from a smartphone into this input here. And it's fitted with a mix minus function. That means you are essentially sending back a mix without the caller's own voice, therefore eliminating feedback or potential echo. Now, one thing about the PodTrack compared to something like the LiveTrack is that the PodTrack it comes fitted with a USB mix minus function. And just like the smartphone mix minus function, this is for your USB device, your computer or smartphone. What that means is you can send back audio from a computer into the PodTrack P8 and stream on the same time on the computer without introducing any feedback or echo. So that is immediately useful if you're doing a lot of podcasting. Well, as to be expected from the PodTrack P8 for podcasters. Now, another nice thing about the PodTrack P8 is that it has 6 individual headphone outs, which has its own dedicated mix. That means if you have 6 podcasters in the same room recording with the PodTrack P8, you can have independent mix outputs for each of their headphones, which might be useful in some scenarios. And in the bottom here, where we have our on-air section, we have the output knobs for your USB out, the analog outs above here, and of course you have your transport buttons like the record, stop, markers, which will be useful when you're doing editing in an audio editing software on your computer, and the play and pause button. Now, we also have 9 sound pads here, which you can use to trigger sound effects, playback interviews, or any sound bits that you want. And while we have 9 pads here, which are colored, you in fact have 4 banks. That means you have up to 36 sound pads that you can trigger. I'm not sure you're going to be needing that many sound pads to perform with, but might be useful in some cases that you might be using in your podcasting scenario. Now, on the back, we have the simple on and off button, your input for the adapter, and then we have a USB-C input that is also bus powered enabled. So that means you can actually run the PodTrack P8 powered by an iPad or your computer without the power adapter source. And here, I appreciate that we have the SD card as a full SD card, not the micro or mini SD card, so I don't have to have adapters lying around when I'm using the PodTrack P8. Just a full-size SD card would do with this. The PodTrack P8 also can be powered with 4 AA batteries on the back here, which I think this is a little bit old in terms of technology because, well, I might as well just run off the PodTrack off a power bank to the USB-C input rather than using 4 AA batteries, which only holds up to about 2 hours of operational use. Yeah, so I probably won't use that. So, but given said that, it's a nice neat feature in case if you don't find yourself a power source but you can get 4 AA batteries from any convenience store near you. So let's start using the PodTrack P8. I'm going to put in my headphones into output 1 on the headphones, and using a simple USB-C cable, you have to buy this separately. I'm going to plug into the USB port, and the end will go into my iPad here. Since the PodTrack P8 can be bus powered, just turn it on and it should load. There we go. Alright, nice colors. Okay, so while it's loading here, I'm just going to quickly plug in my microphone into the mic input number 1, and straight out here, pretty simple and pretty easy to explain, right? So we see that we have 3 hours and 23 minutes left on my SD card, and you know what, I'm just going to hit on record so you can hear everything I do on the PodTrack P8. Okay, so basically if I go into mic number 1 and I click on the settings, we can see that we have a few settings. I'm going to turn on Defender Power first, and we can see we already have levels. Okay, I'm using the SC Electronics X1A so you can hear how it sounds together with the PodTrack P8. Now, the minimum and max slider is for our gain level, so if I turn that, that's basically the gains for my microphones, and if I turn up the fader, I can begin to hear myself in the PodTrack P8, which is great. You can see we have limiters, filter for that, and also a low cut for our microphone. And tone is basically EQ disguised as a simple slider between bass and also treble. So let me hear my sound going bass here, my voice getting darker right now, and also my voice getting brighter. This is a simple operation. You won't see that, mixer sort of like EQ with the frequency, the Q factors and more. You won't see that on this PodTrack P8. And then we have this effect called compressor slash de-esser, which is a little bit funny because to see them combined together, because if you understand what a compressor and de-esser is, basically a compressor averages out your volume of the recording so that the soft sound parts of your recording and also loud parts of recording are more balanced so that you sound audible in a recording. And a de-esser basically removes that sibilance and all this in your recording that can be a little bit annoying when it's listened back at high levels. So to see a compressor and de-esser combined into one and then selectable with a slider here is a little bit strange to see on a device, but I guess, again, this is made for layman users. Make your voice sound professional. I'm not too sure about that. Alright, so basically that's the Zoom PodTrack P8, and if you go back here, what I was interested in is basically to look at the noise reduction function that the PodTrack P8 that Zoom says the PodTrack has. So that is found in the on air, and we can see that we have noise reduction. So this is not the noise reduction function that I was hoping it is, where it would actually reduce the noise from our surroundings. But what it does is it decreases background noise by turning down the volume of other microphone tracks. So it's more like a ducking sort of like function rather than a noise reduction function. So that should be labeled as a ducking feature rather than a noise reduction feature. Alright, so and we can see that we have the pad function, which gives us the ability to program different sorts of banks. So we have 4 banks, bank A, bank C, D, and D, right? And each of these banks here can be programmed to something that triggers immediately a loop or more. So we just have to program something there. And for example, I'm going to play one of these, like an applause. Alright, so basically quite simple. We can actually program that, the volume, where is it, one shot, pause, loop, hold, and all that kind of stuff with the pads. So it's quite simple to understand the users here, and I think it's quite user-friendly in a way. I've clicked on the channel number 6, we can also change the treble and bass from the music or audio input that we send in from the USB channel 6, and we have the USB mix minus function, which is essentially the same thing as the TRS input on the smartphone channel here. So yeah, the PodTrack P8, kind of neat. Not too bad. So let's talk about the pros and cons of the PodTrack P8 compared to the Rodecaster. First off, it has 6 microphone inputs, more than the 4 inputs on the Rodecaster. And you might find that if you're recording a larger group, this might be useful. And you also see that having more inputs can be a lifesaver given some recording situations. The PodTrack P8 is also slightly cheaper compared to the Rodecaster, which is a pro. But if you want to go for the Rodecaster, for that difference, I would say go for the Rodecaster. Now, what I like about the PodTrack P8 is its ease of use. The moment I started out, I can see that this is quite simple to understand, and I don't have to figure out how to use it or look at the manuals to begin recording on it. It also has more customizable pads, so we have up to 36 pads on the PodTrack P8. And if you look at the functions, what I like about it is you can quickly program the different types of things like one shot to hit the pad and just play a sound bit of one shot. Pause it, so you can click to pause it, loop it, or hold it as long as you want to. So it's very easy to program on the PodTrack P8. Now, the PodTrack P8 also has that nice little vocal modifiers where you have those treble, compressor, and de-esser. So if you like something simple to they can use on your voice and your recordings and make it go brighter or darker, this will be quite useful. And also, the PodTrack P8 runs on lower power, so that means it's useful for this little emergency AA batteries that you can actually insert and record straight away on the PodTrack P8. Now, I've not heard the preamps on the Rodecaster, but from what I hear on the PodTrack P8, the preamp sounds decent. They sound decent for most recording usage, but they're not the best preamps I've heard on an audio interface, a mixer, or recording device like this. And in terms of the build, the PodTrack is basically made out of mostly plastic. It's not flimsy. It's quite solid, but given that it is plastic, you don't want this to drop off the table and hit the floor, causing it to crack. Compared to the Rodecaster, you can see that it's mostly made out of metal, making it look like more of a professional device compared to the PodTrack that looks more like a prosumer device. Now, the other thing that you're going to note is the existence of the Bluetooth module in the Rodecaster. On the PodTrack, you would have to buy a additional Bluetooth module called the BTA2 if you want to input Bluetooth audio into the PodTrack P8, and that means extra cost for you. And finally, one of the biggest cons on the PodTrack P8 by Zoom is the lack of firmware updates. Now, if you look at the Rodecaster, you'll see that Rode constantly pushes out updates and firmware updates for the device, Rodecaster. And basically, the updates are quite interesting in a way that it allows users of the Rodecaster to use their pads as MIDI control and MIDI sense to control different scenes, different camera scenes, and different angles from OBS Studio that the PodTrack cannot do. So that is quite a useful firmware update that we see on Rodecaster compared to the PodTrack P8. But again, let me know what you think about the PodTrack P8 and the Rodecaster. Will you be buying the PodTrack P8? What you like about it, what you hate about it? Let me know in the comment section down below, and I'd love to hear from you. See you in the next one.